everyone. I hope you've had a great week. Today we're going to talk about lessons 77 through 80. So let's get started. This week you're going to need your lessons manual, the student worksheet book, the math card games manual with the game cards. You'll need tally sticks. If you have a thermometer, that would be great for one of the lessons. If you don't have one, that's fine. It's an optional element to the lesson. You'll need the geared clock, the drawing board, a T-square, the 30-60 triangle, and you will need paper or index cards with the words north, south, east, or west and west. Each of those words will go on a separate sheet of paper or a separate index card. Now this week, your child is going to complete assessment 2, and they're going to learn about reading scales and doing some more work on the clock. Let's get started by turning to lesson 77. This is assessment day. You'll want to make sure that your child is well rested and that they are ready for the test. You might also want to have your child take the test at the better part of the day where they perform a little bit better. So some children take tests better earlier in the day when their mind's fresher. Other kids are not quite awake enough to take the test early in the morning, so they need to kind of warm up a little bit. Also, some children take tests better after a meal, and others get too tired after eating. So you're going to want to make sure that you give your child the best opportunity and advantage as possible in finding that best time of the day to take that test. Now, once your child completes taking the assessment test, you're going to want to discuss with them any errors they made. And you'll specifically want to find out if they made an error because of a silly mistake or if they made the error because they did not understand something. Now, if your child's error was made because they did not understand something, you're going to want to go back and review that lesson that covers that material. I'm going to include which lesson or lessons to review for each of these questions. So if your child struggled with problem number 1, which is 53 plus 18, you'll want to review lessons 20 and 21. For problem 2, 121 minus 21, you can review lessons 54, 56, and 58. For problem 3, 52 plus 28, go ahead and look at lessons 20 and 21. For problem 4, which is 3.5 plus 4.5, you can review lesson 68. For problem 5, which is 4 times 3, review lesson 36. For problem 6, 1.5 minus 1/2, look at lessons 66 and 69. For problem 7, which is the parallelogram, you can review lesson 74. For problem 8, the hexagon, take a look at lesson 63. For problem 9, the equilateral triangle, look at lesson 64. For problem 10, the 30-60 triangle, you can review lessons 62 and 74. For problem 11, the centimeter, take a look at lesson 68. For problem 12, the pentagon, you can look at lessons 60. For problem 13, the inch, you can review lesson 72. For problem 14, the trapezoid, take a look at lesson 74. Problem 15, the word problem, take a look at lessons 28 and 29. And for the final problem, problem number 16, the dividing square, you can review lesson 69. As I mentioned before, you will want to review any concept that your child did not understand. However, only do a quick review. And while the past segment of content that you covered is important information for your child to learn, you do not need to linger on this material if your child missed only a few questions. Once that assessment has been completed, play a math card game to reward your child. Now, if your child was stressed out about taking this assessment test, don't correct or go over the assessment on the exact same day that they take the test. Instead, go over it and review the material on the next day. All right, well, let's go ahead and turn to lesson 78. For this lesson, you're going to need the tally sticks, and that's these right here, the tally sticks. And if you have one, you will also need a thermometer for this lesson. Now, the thermometer is optional, so if you don't have one, that's just fine. Now, the first paragraph of the warm-up is going to have your child count by 5s and 10s. If this is a struggle for your child, you're going to want to review that several different times throughout the day. For example, go ahead and do it during the math class, but then maybe later on during lunch, have them count by their 5s and 10s, maybe count with them. Then later on in the afternoon, do it again. You'll want to give them some practice in reviewing that so they're really comfortable with counting in their 5s and 10s. Now, the second paragraph of the warm-up is going to be discussing the difference between inches and centimeters. This material was covered in lesson 73 if you need to go back and review. The last 2 paragraphs are reviewing shapes and geometry terminology. Now, for the rest of this lesson, we're going to be working on reading scales. For some children, including a couple of my own kids, reading scales is very difficult, mostly because the ticks on the scales can have different values. Now, you're going to be covering some of the most common tick values, and what you're going to want to do is help your child learn to see the value of the tick marks when they first look at the scale before they start figuring out what number is what. So take a look at this section called a scale with 1 mark at each number. In this section, the first thing you're going to do is draw those three scales that's listed. And notice that the first scale on the left is a tick mark for every 10 numbers. The middle scale actually has a tick mark for every 5 numbers, and that third scale has a tick mark for every single number. So you might want to familiarize yourself with that as well. Then the first section, you're going to actually ask questions about scales in general, and then specifically about the scales you drew. Then you're going to really focus in on that third scale where there's a tick at every single number. And then you're going to ask questions to your child to find various different numbers on the scale. You're going to want to keep asking various numbers over and over until your child can find the numbers fairly easy. That means you may need to add some more examples than what they have listed in the lesson manual. Now, when your child is finding a number on the scale, have them use the tally sticks as the needles. So if you have your scale like this, you're going to have your tally stick point to that number. Take a look at the section called Scale with Marks at Even Numbers. In this section, you're going to draw another scale that's listed in the explanation section on the bottom of the first page. Now, this scale is a commonly used scale, but for younger children, this is actually the hardest scale to read. The tick marks on this scale represent every other number or the even numbers. So in this section, you're going to ask questions about the scale and have them find the various numbers on the scale. You're going to want to ask as many numbers as they need so that you know your child understands how to read the scale and can get to those numbers accurately. If you have a thermometer in your home, this is the point in the lesson where that thermometer can be used. Pull that out, have your child read the different temperatures on it. And in fact, because this scale is more difficult to use, you might want to pull this thermometer out several times a day for the next couple weeks for further practice. If you do not have a scale, then you might want to print out a thermometer-like scale so that your child can practice reading it more than just this one particular day, because this scale really is a complex scale for many kids. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the section called Scale with Marks with a Multiple of 5. Again, you're going to draw another scale as is shown in the lesson on the top-ish part of the second page of the lesson. Then you're going to ask questions about the scale and have your child find the numbers. Now the numbers that are suggested in this section are all multiples of 5. If you have a strong learner, or if your child likes the challenges or is enjoying reading scales, then I would recommend asking numbers that are not a multiple of 5. So you can ask for the number like 32, 47, or 53, numbers that are not going to be right on that tick mark. Once you complete all of these activities, then give your child worksheet 47. Have them read the directions before they start the worksheet. Now, take a look at the section under Worksheet 47. Under the second paragraph, it says, remind your child that when drawing lines in the curved scale, to start at the number and then draw towards the center part. That way your line is going to be more accurate, and they're not going to have this squiggly line all the way up. If you are concerned, or if your child is a perfectionist, you can let your child use a straight edge to keep that line straight if you so desire. Once they complete the worksheet, go over and discuss any errors they made. There is not a math card game suggested for this lesson, so you're going to want to make sure that you play a math card game to keep your child's math facts strong. All right, well, let's go ahead and turn to lesson 79. The first paragraph of this warm-up is going to review the things that your child learned in lesson 78. The second paragraph is going to have your child count by 5s and 10s. Again, if this is a struggle, make sure you have your child practice counting by 5s and 10s various times throughout the day. The rest of the warm-up is reviewing geometry shapes and geometry terminology. Review previous lessons as necessary. Look at the section called Reviewing Telling Time. In this section, you are going to review how to tell time on an analog clock. You're going to start by using the geared clock and setting it for various hours throughout the clock. Make sure that with your minute hand is always pointed to the 12, and you're just going to move so this hour hand is at different places on the clock. Do as many examples as your child needs to get solid with that. Now, if your child has not had much experience with telling time on an analog clock, you might want to help them see how to tell the time on the clock and provide plenty of practice for them to learn how to tell the time on a geared clock. Now, the last paragraph of that section is going to have your child use their arms to show the hours. So they're going to stand up and they're going to straighten their arms up, but because I don't have a smaller screen, I'm going to make my arms shrink, smaller, but you're going to have them use their arms. They're going to do 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and so forth. Sometimes that just really, using their body really helps solidify those ideas. Now look at the section called Worksheet 48. At this point of the lesson, you're going to give your child the worksheet, the drawing board, and their tools, and you're going to explain that the clock on this worksheet is in the shape of an octagon. And so then you're going to talk about the shape of an octagon and ask various questions about it. Then you're going to have your child make tick marks on the clock and write the hours of the clock. Let me show you how that will work. So we are first going to start worksheet 48 by lining up. First of all, the worksheet is taped to the board, and then we have the center point of our clock. And we're going to line up our T-square, and we're going to do the easy tick marks first. We're going to do the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock tick marks lined up here. So we're just going to line up our T-square, and we're going to make our little tick marks here off to the side. The next easiest ones to do are the 12 and the 6 o'clock. And we're going to use our 30-60 triangle. And we're going to slide our T-square down, and then we're going to line up our 90 degrees off of that. We're going to do the top, the 12 o'clock, and then the 6 o'clock tick marks. So the next set of tick marks we're going to use, we're going to keep our 30-60 triangle still sitting on the T-square the same direction, but we're going to set it up so that the side line is lined up with our center portion, and we're going to make our 11 o'clock and our 5 o'clock marks. And then we're going to flip this over. We're going to line up the same side, and we're going to do our 1 o'clock and our 7 o'clock tick marks. Then we're going to tilt our 30-60 triangle sideways so that the longest line is resting on the T-square. And again, we're going to line it up with our center point. We'll draw our 10 o'clock, our 4 o'clock, and again flip it over. we're going to draw our 8 o'clock and our 2 o'clock. Then we have all of our tick marks written. So we just need to put in our hours. 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now, when your child is writing the number on the clock, there's a special hint that you might want to say to your child shown in the section called Writing the Numbers on the Clock. The first sentence says this: tell the child that the clock starts at the top with an invisible 0. And then they can start the 1 right here. Also, your child is going to need this worksheet for the next several lessons, so you're going to want to keep that handy. After your child completes all of the activities in this lesson, you're going to want to have them maybe look at an analog clock that you have in your home, and then ask them what time it is or what hour it is periodically through the day. That way, especially if it's once the hour reaches right on the hour, that's going to help give them extra practice. Now, there's not a math card game listed for this lesson, so make sure you pick one that will keep up your child's math facts. Okay, well, let's turn to lesson 80. For this lesson, you're going to need paper or index cards with one direction, with the direction each on a different card. So you're going to have north on a card, south on a card, east on a card, and west on the card. And you're also going to want to have those cards or papers hanging up in the appropriate wall of your schoolroom. So the north card going on your north wall, south card on your south wall, etc. And get that all set up before the lesson begins. Now, this lesson is going to work on AM, PM, and directions. Now, the first paragraph of the lesson is going to review material that they covered in lesson 79. The second paragraph is going to be working on scales and covering material that you learned in lesson 78. Review those lessons as necessary. Now, the last paragraphs of this lesson, again, is going to review shapes and geometry terms and measurements. Review any lesson that's necessary that your child may have forgotten along the way. Now look at the section called Hour Numbers. In this section, you're going to use the clock that you drew for lesson 79 and then ask different questions about it. Now take a look at the section called Hours in a Day. In this section, you are actually going to read a little history lesson on how we started telling time. It will also introduce the idea of AM and PM. During this section, you're going to want to tell your child that midnight is the beginning of the day and that noon is halfway between sunrise and sunset. Now, my kids, they really struggled with remembering which one was which. AM, is it in the morning, or PM, is that in the morning? They would just keep getting confused. So here are some tricks that you can use to help your child remember which one is which one's AM and which one's PM. So for AM, you could say, think of it as after midnight, or a morning, AM after midnight, AM after morning. And PM, you can say as being past midday. Now take a look at the section called directions. Oh, one other way is it's in alphabetical order. AM comes first, PM comes second. All right, now look at the section called directions. In this section, you're going to have your child find the different directional words that you tape to the walls and then discuss them. There is not a lot of time spent on this particular concept in this lesson. So if you want, you can have your child point to various directions after you say them. So find the north wall, point to the north wall. Find the east wall, point to the east wall. Ask them as many times as they need and help them find the directions, the different directions, several different times in the day. If you have a compass, that might be something else that you might want to play with too. All right, look at the section called Daily Routine. In this paragraph, you're going to provide several sample schedules and times that your child can look and find on the clock. You can add, and I highly recommend you adding your personal examples to help your child really solidify the idea of AM and PM and the routine and the schedule. I also recommend that you frequently use AM and PM in your words as you talk about these schedules. So I would say at 7 a.m. in the morning, I eat breakfast, or in 1 o'clock p.m., I like to lay down for a nap, or whatever it is. All right. Also, I would suggest over the next couple weeks that you add AM and PM when you're talking about time, or when you're asking your child about time. You might even want to ask your child, is it AM now or is it PM now? And ask them that various times during the day to kind of get that idea solidified in their mind. The more they practice with this initially, the more it's going to be solid and they won't forget it as easily. After you complete those activities, your child is going to do worksheet 49. When they complete worksheet 49, go over any errors that your child has made. There is not a math card game listed for this lesson, so make sure you play a math card game that will keep your child's math facts solid. Now, if your child is really strong with their adding and subtracting math facts, you may want to venture into new areas of multiplication to kind of stretch and challenge them a little bit. Also, don't forget to keep out worksheet 48 as you're going to need it again next week. Well, that's it for the week. If you have any questions or concerns about a lesson, or if your child is struggling with something, give us a call or email us. We're here to help. I look forward to seeing you next week as we cover lessons 81 to 84. Have a great week, everybody.